I came here when I was about a year and a half old. We lived here for 33 years. My mother was Bessie Keck Schiffert, and my father was George Andrew Keck. My father kept the banks clean, you know, no poison, no nothing.
There's a smokehouse in the pig pen.
She smoked all her own hands, bacon, sausage.
And then there was a wire fence, and the whole garden was within there.
That was one of those iron fences with graves up. That was all the way around, all the way around to the other side.
The chicken coop, the wash house, the fruit-bearing trees. This is the race, which is what we call this water.
And then we had a pump right outside that's where we pumped the well water for drinking. And the other water was used for power.
In fact, it must have been terrific water because everybody always stopped. And she had a big tin cup there, you know, those old tin cups that they were welcome to have a drink because the water was always cold. And this space between the wash house and the start of the water was grass, and that's where Granny hung her wash. And this was the original garage. It's this big because they had horses. And then later for my grandfather's car, and I don't know whether Uncle Stanley kept his racer in there or not. But then this was built later, and all his trucks, because he had two coal trucks, I guess. The one closest to the railroad, because this is the railroad, would be the newer one that was built when he got mobilized with all the trucks. And this was our croquet place. We played croquet here. We swam here because it wasn't rough. It had no rapids or anything. This was still right in here. Here's the Y coming down with the road. And now because of these buildings, you can just see a little line where it comes out here. But there was grass next to the mill. And then the road, then these buildings, which would have been the chicken coop and the wash house and the water. Now when you go out the kitchen door, you're entering the mill from this side. And underneath the platform was where the water wheel was.
It was never in view.
Over the water wheel and then onto the falls, so that all you saw from that road, which is Walnut Street, right, is the falls.
That's why there's such a controversy. Some swear there wasn't a mill, but apparently there had to be, or they wouldn't have a mill race, right?
Yeah.
And everything was done like she washed, and when they butchered, everything was run with
water power.
I'm Harry Boose. I've been a volunteer here since about 1988, and I started working here in the mill a couple weeks after I retired. The borough owned this building. It was purchased through Project 70 funds. It was a state project that was initiated in about 1965, which allowed municipalities to get money from the state to restore some of the old places in town. And with that funding, they were able to purchase the land between the railroad and the creek from south of the mill up to High Street in Hellertown. When the Historic Society got it was about 1984, and we've been working on it ever since. When I started, this place was in shambles. The floors had collapsed down on the ground. Some of the original flooring joists were about this wide, about this thick, and only the top and the bottom were milled. The edges were still rounded, and some of them even had bark on. But over the years, because of the flooding, they became rotted, and if you took an ice pick, you could just shove it in real easily. And initially, this would have had an indoor wheel. There's an archway on the north wall, and opposite that, on the south wall, there was another archway. But the race would have been diverted through the mill, who had an indoor wheel. This climate doesn't lend itself to an outdoor wheel during the winter. Sometime in about 1880, the water turbine was invented, and 1887, turbines were installed in here. They're a lot more efficient, and the race would have been changed to the east wall with a gateway that would be open and closed to fill a pit. That way the miller would not have to run up and down the stairs to open and close. He could stay up there and do his milling. Sometime later, when processed by industry, the mills were going out of business, so this place was changed into a feed mill. This wheel here was part of another section which was still run by water power. Energy would have been transferred to the second floor with a belt on these wheels. That would take it power up to a grinder, which would crack the grain, and then it was dumped into huge hoppers, which were in this area here. Then there was a conical section, and off that, there was an auger in it to mix all these grains. You could tap off it and sell it as feed fill for chickens or anything else. Now here was a belt with small buckets on it that would take grain up to the third floor to be processed through a mill which would be distributed to grinding wheels on the second floor for grinding into the flour or cornmeal or whatever they were hired to do. Now, these floors had collapsed onto the ground beneath it. It had to be cleaned out. Foundations had to be recapped. We put new flooring beams in and new flooring. On the second floor, there were portions that were bad. We had to put new ceiling rafters in and new flooring up there. Now this main beam is 37 feet long, has a 12 by 13 inch cross section, and it was a single beam. So this would have been all first growth timbers that were used in here, and it had cracked. We couldn't get a single beam like that. So we had to put two beams together, splice them, and put a column beneath the center where they're joined. Incidentally, somebody was aware that there were grinding wheels buried out here, and the borough came down and dug them out for us, and then they regraded it, and we had, those are the three grinding wheels we have outside. Now one of them is called a French burr. There were individual blocks of stone that were banded together with a metal band. The French burr was a superior stone for grinding. All the others were locals, and they would wear a lot easier, and they would have to be redressed more often. And from what I understand, there were itinerant workers who would go from mill to mill, and their job would be putting new edges on these stones so that they would mill the flour uniformly for any grain that was being used. The ceiling had been raised at some point. On the second floor, a trail rail is only about this far, about less than 12 inches above the flooring. And when we came in, there's a wooden plate all around beneath the ceiling. Above that, there were voids about this height and about that wide, so we know these were voids, and that's where the ceiling beams had been placed, but now they're above that. On the exterior, we had planned to start chipping out some mortar because it was bad. I know a guy who has the repair business for stone and brick homes, and they do the grouting between those stones and stuff. So he did everything gratis. It was a donation. And then he said, this place needs some painting. I'll leave the scaffolding up. You guys can paint it. When it's finished, then call me and I'll take the scaffolding out. A hardware store in Hellertown, he said, it should be sealed. I'll donate 5-gallon buckets of silicone seal so you can spray the exterior and seal it. You know, so we had a lot of help, monetary, and just all this stuff that was given to us for nothing. Even some of the timbers and stuff. My son's a graduate forester, and he was able to get it for us for a good price. So everything, every little bit helps.